Dr. Dimeji Kareem is a consultant psychiatrist, having qualified as a medical practitioner in 1988. He has worked continuously in psychiatric practice for over 20 years. In his everyday work, Dr. Kareem acts as a responsible practitioner for forensic patients with mental illness, personality disorders, and autistic spectrum disorders. He joins me on the Just Steve show today to talk about his life and his work. You're welcome back if you're joining us. This is the Just Eve show. My guest on the show today is a doctor, a medical doctor. I've been through his CV and I'm like, okay, where am I going to start with him? But I'm sure we're going to have an interesting show in the next 25 minutes or so. So you stick around with us. And my guest is Dr. Kareem Dimeji. Or is it the other way around?
Dimeji Kareem.
Dimeji Kareem,
Yes,
you're welcome to
yeah.
the show. It's good
Thank
to have
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
We do have a ritual on this show where we take our guests back to the very beginning
Yeah.
of their life, as far back as you can remember. What were your growing up years like?
Well, my growing up years were in Lagos. I was born in Lagos, and I grew up in Surulere in Lagos in the 70s. I attended St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic School, which is on Atunrashi Street in Surulere, in Lagos. It was a Catholic school, boys-only school. We had our own girls' primary school, Our Lady of Fatima, just a few blocks away. I think growing up in Lagos those days was very exciting and very happy. It's completely different from what you see today.
Can imagine.
Lagos was a very quiet and nice place. There was no armed robbery. There was not a lot of crimes. Children could play on the streets without fear of being kidnapped. Government was working. People were not very rich. You have a few rich people, but most people could kind of get by.
It was more like you had a middle class.
You had a kind of middle class that was functional. But since then, you now have that big gap between the rich and the poor. But in those days, everybody was kind of happy.
You had brothers and sisters?
Yes, I do have brothers and sisters. When I was growing up, my father was in England because my father left Nigeria in the 60s.
Okay.
I think in the late 60s, and he went to Germany, where he studied for 2 years, then came to England, and he was here for many years. So I grew up with my two brothers, with my mother in Lagos. I do have half siblings, but they were living with their mothers, so we were not really kind of together until Dad came back to Nigeria in 1976.
So how was that? Didn't you miss him? You were pretty young. You didn't miss.
Yeah, of course you miss him, but the mother was playing the role of both parents at the time. He was writing to us. He was communicating with us as much as he could.
So what schools did you go to after primary school?
After primary school, I stayed in Lagos for a year. I was going to go to Eko Boys High School because that's where every child that left St. Thomas went to either Eko Boys High School or Batch Freeman High School.
Okay.
So I was going to go to Eko Boys High School. But on the day of the entrance exam, I lost my exam slip, which is like the slip that tells me where to sit. Now, I was so stupid. I could have gone to the invigilators and say, oh, I've lost my slip, and maybe they could have found me a seat or my proper seat. So I was just walking around. I found an empty seat and sat there. And of course, I didn't get my result because I didn't sit on my seat.
Oh dear. So
I ended up going to another secondary school, urgently, in Apapa, Warrior Jeremy Grammar School, where I spent 1 year. And then, of course, my father got back from England around that time, and we had to move to Benin. So I went off to Benin and started secondary school at a Diken Grammar School as a boarding student. So that again was another different ball
Ball
game.
game.
Yes, because Benin in those days was very nice actually.
Yeah.
I remember, walking down from when we first got to Benin. We lived down. Can't remember the name of the place now, but we used to walk down there to Ikoba Hill. We used to stroll around Benin City, New Benin Market. There was Leventis. There was all those nice
Yes.
stores in those
At Ring
days.
Road.
Yes, on Ring Road. So Benin was a very nice place. Leaving Lagos and going to Benin, I actually felt, oh, this is heaven here, because Lagos at that time was beginning to get crowded. People were moving out of different cities and all coming to Lagos, congregating in Lagos. Because if you remember, around 1973, there was the Udoji Award,
Oh yeah, yeah.
where the government gave civil servants a lot of money, and then every houses started buying TVs and radiograms, and TV antennas started springing up on every roofs in Lagos. And so people started migrating from different places. So Lagos was starting to get crowded at that point. So when we moved to Benin, Benin was still relatively quieter and easier, and I quite liked it.
Interesting.
And
So,
I grew up there.
did you eventually go to the University of Benin, or you went?
No, again, as fate would have it, I wanted to go to University of Benin. I did pass my O levels very well. I had 7 A's and 2B's, I think it was. So I was qualified to go there to read medicine, but I didn't pass the JAM.
Oh,
So basically, I had to go and do A levels. So I left Benin, and my father's project had finished, which is the University of Benin Teaching Hospital Complex that he was designing and building with Felix Ibro. So they finished that project, so we had to return to Lagos. So I went to Ogun State Polytechnic to do my A levels. Abeokuta is not very far from Lagos, but it's not, you can't go on a day basis from Lagos to Benin. So I had to live in Abeokuta with a reverend father who is like a family friend or something to my grandparents. So I lived there for 2 years doing my A levels.
okay. Now, we are Africans, and we
Yeah.
have this African things that our parents do. If you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not an engineer, then you're probably just a failure, or something like that. Where you said you studied medicine, were you forced to study medicine? Was it something that you wanted to do?
Okay, the story is quite interesting as to
So there's a
as to
story.
how I studied medicine. Now, when I was growing up, I don't know if you know this. In our families, when our uncles get married to wives, while after we had been born, those wives don't call us by our names; they give us nicknames. I don't know if you know this. So they will call us things like they have different names in Yoruba language. But for me, all the wives of my uncles called me doctor. That was my nickname.
Why?
I don't know. I have no clue why they called me doctor. And this was like I was very young. And somehow, I guess, is a kind of manifestation of. And when I then got to a point where I started thinking of what I wanted to do in life as a profession, I didn't think of anything initially other than to read medicine. And of course, when my father came from England, it was like, yes, you have to do medicine. So it kind of happened that that was what I was going to do. Because when I finished secondary school in Benin, Uniben actually offered me biochemistry in place of medicine. And I said, no, sorry, I'm not doing that. And that's why I went on to do A levels. And when I finished A levels, I actually did A levels and a UI exam it's again long story. I mean, Nigeria those days, when you did A levels, you usually do the GC A levels and the Cambridge A levels, which is run from the UK. But my year, the Cambridge exam stopped. So University of Ibadan started an equivalent exam called UI A levels. So I did both. And I had enough points in both exams to go to UI. And basically, the way my life is I always have one focus. I don't kind of divide my attention. If I want to do one thing, that is what I'm going to do, and that is it. I don't say, oh, this will not work, or I have to think of alternative. If it doesn't work, then I think of alternatives, you see. So basically, I chose University of Ibadan. You have to make three choices after A levels when you go to university. So I chose Ibadan, and there are regions. You have to choose from two regions. So I chose Ibadan, Lagos or something, and Benin. So I had those three choices in my JAM form. So basically, I got admitted to University of Ibadan because I had enough points both in the UIA levels and the GCA levels. This is getting interesting now. I arrived at University of Ibadan because I had my cousins there already. I already knew what hostel, Teda Hall, that was where I was going to live in UI. Because with medicine, you spend 2 years in the main campus and then 3 years in the teaching hospital. So I knew I was going to live in Teda Hall with my cousins. Both of them are in the US now. They're already talking to the hall manager for me, you know, the hall whatever person. So I got to UCH to go and register. And the college officer, I can't remember his name now, said to me, well, sorry, this was Shagari time. Shagari was the president then. Oh, you know, and then corruption was beginning to get rife in Nigeria and all kind of stuff. So I arrived at the place and the college officer said, oh, sorry, some of you have been moved to other universities.
Oh, no.
And I thought, where on earth does that happen? And he said, yeah, it's happened. You go and look on the list and see where your name is, and that's the university you go.
Uh-oh.
Seriously. And I went up to the list and I saw my name under University of Maiduguri. And I thought, okay. First, I had to look at the map
To
know where Maiduguri was. And then I looked, because we had, you know that JAMB booklet, there's a Nigerian map in front of it.
Yeah.
And I looked at that map and Maiduguri was up there. That was scary. I had never
Been to the north.
crossed River Niger in my life. The farthest
You've been through into Maiduguri.
Lagos, Abeokuta, that's all I've been in Nigeria. Now I was asked to go to Maiduguri, which is like 2,000 miles from Lagos. So, you know, my father stepped in. We tried our best to say, you know, this is not, you know, appropriate. This person did not choose this university. Why should you send them to a place they didn't choose? Well, that was it. It happened. So my dad said, well, you could stay and do well, they did give me an offer to say stay and do
Something
biochemistry or physiology for a year, and then the following year you can do medicine, start your medicine. But that's not right because I've got enough points to do medicine. I have a letter of offer of admission to University of Ibadan for medicine. So why should I, you know, compromise that and go and do something else? Well, they said, well, if you can't do that, then you have to go to Maiduguri.
We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll continue with this interview. We'll talk about your father as well.
Right.
Don't go anywhere. It's still the Just Steve Show. We'll be back in a jiffy.
When he was 22 years old, so some hunters found him and captured him and brought him back to Maiduguri. And of course, he couldn't speak, he couldn't communicate, he couldn't socialize. And so they threw him in a psychiatric hospital. And actually, one of the first things I remember that we did was we raised awareness of psychiatry, of mental health within the medical population and then the university itself.
welcome back. It's still the Justive Show, and we are talking to Dr. Kareem.
So anyway, to cut the long story short, my dad said, "Look, just go and try and see." So I got on the plane because if you have to go by road, it's like 2-3 days journey to get there. So, so I got on the plane and landed in Maiduguri, and my first, as I came out of the plane, it was like I was going into hellfire.
The heat.
The heat that hits you in the
Dry.
face,
Very
dry, windy, hot,
Dust.
blazing hot heat just met me. I wanted to run back inside the plane because I had never experienced that type of heat before in my life. And then, got out there and it was blazing hot, very, very hot. Anyway, got in the taxi. Then when I got to University of Maiduguri itself, because it was a brand new university at the time, not brand new, but relatively new, and very well, you know, sponsored, if I could put it that way. It was very nice, very beautiful place. So when I got into the university and I looked at it and I thought, this is not bad, actually. It's not bad actually. And then got to the college office, medical college office, and looked at their staff list and their program, and can you believe it? Their lecturers were all British.
Oh, so that was destiny taking you
Yeah.
there.
Our provost was Professor Scarborough. Our ONG, head of ONG, was Professor Lister. These people I'm talking about are renowned physicians, worldwide. Professor Lister was our head of Obs and Gynae, and so on and so forth. And I thought, okay, I think I'll just stay here then. And luckily, there was another guy, Femi Adeyemi, a very good friend of mine, who was also diverted from University of Lagos. So we happened to meet there on that day.
So you were comfortable.
And he told me his story, and I told him my story. And he's also from Lagos. And we hooked up, and we thought, what do we do? And I said, look, I like it. It's a very pretty place. Flowers everywhere, nice trees, nice buildings. And then the college itself, the medical college itself, has renowned lecturers in it. So we decided, yeah, that's it. Now we registered today, and matriculation is tomorrow. So if you see my matriculation picture, I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing a shirt and trouser because I wasn't prepared. I didn't even know that they were having matriculation the day after we registered. So we arrived there, registered, and they just said, well, matric is tomorrow. If you want to do it, go and pay for your gown and hat. And so both of us went. So both of us, we didn't bring suits. We just came to register. So we just rushed off, got the gowns, and matriculated the following day.
Okay. Now medicine is actually quite broad. So what was your specialty?
I mean, what is my specialty now?
Yeah, well, after when you finished, yeah.
Well, that's another story.
Okay.
Now, if I tell you again something about medicine and how I came to the specialty where I am now, I'm a consultant psychiatrist. When I was in medical school, the first 2 years you did physiology, biochemistry, anatomy. Very rigorous, very hectic. I was probably sleeping 2 hours a day.
Is really hectic. Even how it sounds.
No, seriously, you kind of run from lecture room to lecture room, run to the refectory, the dining room, and you have to rush your food and run out. Practically running to get to the lab to do this and that, and there's a test here. And it was quite hectic, but after those 2 years, you then go to clinical school, which is in the University College Teaching Hospital. So you move from the university campus after 2 years to University Teaching Hospital, which is usually not far away, all over Nigeria. That's the arrangement. That's the way it works here as well. So when you start your clinical years, you will then move from one medical department to another. So say you spend 6 months in obs and gynae, 6 months in surgery, 6 months in medicine, internal medicine, 6 months pediatrics, and in between, you'll be spending 3 months in the radiology, for instance, and 3 months in pathology, for instance. So, experience in all those different departments will help one to decide what you really like and what you would like to specialize in. And we spent 3 months doing psychiatry, which is in a psychiatric hospital, so not within the teaching hospital. And when I was doing that placement, the first day I arrived at the Maiduguri Psychiatric Hospital, they allocated a patient to me to go and clerk. You know, what we mean by clerking is you take a history of the patient. Okay. Where were you born? How did you get to the hospital? Blah, 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 and so on, just to get an idea of who the patient is and how they came to be where they were. And as I approached that patient, I can never forget his name. His name is Dangiwa. And the reason they called him Dangiwa was because when his mother had him, his mother left him in the forest and he was raised by elephants.
Are you serious?
Yes.
He was raised by elephants?
Yes.
So he's an elephant?
He's a man raised by elephants.
But acts like an elephant?
He acts like an elephant. He walks like an elephant. He crawls. He makes noise like elephants. And when he was 22 years old, some hunters found him and captured him and brought him back to Maiduguri. And of course, he couldn't speak, he couldn't communicate, he couldn't socialize. And so they threw him in the psychiatric hospital. Oh, no. And that was the patient that was allocated to me my first day in psychiatry placement. And believe me, as I approached this guy,
can you imagine?
He had a bucket next to him, and he just flung the bucket at me.
Oh no!
And I had to run. No, I'm not going near that guy. As you can imagine, that was scary. And I thought, who the hell would want to be a psychiatrist working with this type of people? So I thought I would never ever go be a psychiatrist in my life. But then I had a lecturer. Professor, his name escapes me now. He came from England to lecture us, to teach us in psychiatry, and he was very, very good. So I like the didactic teachings of psychiatry. You know, it was quite interesting. And the guy took to me and he was encouraging me and saying, no, psychiatry is not that bad, especially if you go abroad. You know, in Nigeria, it's still quite rudimentary, blah, blah, blah. And then he encouraged me to start a student body called Students for Mental Health International, which I started in the University of Maiduguri, and I was the first president. So even though I didn't quite have a good experience practically, because of my relationship with my psychiatric lecturer, I started that mental health organization. And actually one of the first things I remember that we did was we raised awareness of psychiatry, of mental health within the medical population and then the university itself. And then we had a mental health day where we actually went back to that psychiatric hospital and got some donations to clean the place up and make it look nice, as it were, those days. So that was all the experience I had in Nigeria with psychiatry.
Thanks for watching. That's our show for today. We're going to do this again sometime soon. Till then, I remain Evelyn Obaho. Have a wonderful time. Goodbye and God bless.